everybody, to Survive and Advance on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Survive and Advance is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. To find out more information about MyBookie.ag, go to thegruelingtruth.net, click on the banner at the top of the page, or put in the promo code LEGEND at the MyBookie.ag website, and you will get up to a $1,000 cash bonus, up to 50% of your first deposit. I am your co-host for Survive and Advance, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I'd like to welcome in my co-host, 1981 national champion, Steve Risley. How you doing, Steve?
It's Championship Monday. How can you not be doing any better? This is the greatest day in college sports as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Steve, my only question is this. Does it get kind of redundant to hear 1981 national champion, and is there anything that makes you wish you'd have done something since then?
Yes. I'll just answer yes.
All right, and our guest today to preview the national championship game from the Indiana Sports Beat. Help me welcome to the show, Jim Coyle. How you doing, Jim?
Great, guys. Mike, how are you? Steve-O, how you doing, brother? How are things out west?
Things are great out here. Like I said, it's going to hit probably 90 today out here, what they're calling for. It was 88 yesterday, a little warmer today, so
I hope it rains.
We're dealing with it.
Me too.
Oh, God. I would love a rainy Monday. We don't see rain from this point. We won't see rain again until next February. Now we're done with rain.
All right, so let's go ahead and look at tonight's championship game, Texas Tech and Virginia. I just got done watching ESPN, and everybody there, including Stephen A., whatever his name is, talk about how this will be a lowly rated game because it will be ugly. I, on the other hand, I don't know about you, Steve, but I like games like this. We got two teams that are fundamentally sound. They play defense. We don't have to watch Duke and North Carolina and watch all these idiots on ESPN gush over the greatest rivalry supposedly in college sports. So what's your take, Virginia, Texas Tech?
I tell you what, this may be one of the most evenly matched games that I can recall in a long time. And I've got ties to both teams. Obviously, with Texas Tech, it's a team that's based on the foundation of Bob Knight and Pat Knight, building the foundation of that program. And so I got a strong tie there. And then with Kyle Guy, he's a Lawrence Central grad, which is where I played high school basketball at. I'm now the second greatest player ever to come from Lawrence Central High School. I thought I was the greatest, but now I think after the three free throws he hit, I think I dropped to number 2.
Wait a second, Steve. I've told this to you before. 3 years ago, you were number 2. Just get over it.
Okay, I'm over it. I'm over now, but now I'm willing to admit it. I wouldn't admit it until so. I think that this is going to be an epic game. Texas Tech, their defense is stifling, and I have not seen a team play as well as a team as Virginia plays as a team. So it's going to be an interesting game to me. I'm looking forward to watching it. That's all I can say about it.
Yeah, and the thing that makes me look forward to it, Jim, is just how hard both of these teams play.
Yeah, I'm really not understanding the thought that this is going to be a bad game. First of all, I've seen Texas Tech play a lot of games in this tournament. They've all been incredible games. Almost all these games have been incredible. Anytime a game is just that evenly matched, like Steve said, I don't see how that's anything but great because the other side is trying to beat you. They're trying to impose their will on you, and I think it's going to be a great battle. Just because it's two defensive teams, I think they're just going to be great basketball, and I think it's going to be a great game personally, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, the thing that gets me, Jim, is the fact that if you watch Survive and Advance, the 30 for 30 or whatever it was about NC State Houston, they talk about what a great game that was, and I'm pretty sure that ended up like 53-52, didn't it?
Yeah, you can go back and look at a lot of especially when you get to the championship game. There's a lot of games that fall back into that lower score, but just because they're not getting up and down the floor as fast as always, to me, does not take away from the game, because the game itself that these guys are playing, it's pretty incredible. It's a heck of a chess match that's going on, and it is hard play. It's not like they're sitting back in 1981 with Dean Smith's four corners here. They're battling. They're just going hard. I mean, you've got a Texas Tech team Virginia, obviously, a good defensive team. Texas Tech they're inside your jersey. They're that good.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that Saturday. And Steve, when you look at this, the thing that concerns me the most for Texas Tech is Owens, who I guess was in a walking boot yesterday, but they expect him to play. Could they win this game if they have a Owens that plays at less than 100%? And can they win if Owens can't go at all?
Yes, I think they can, because their defense is so stifling. They play the same style of defense we did in 1981, but at a much higher pace. We weren't as athletic as this basketball team is, but they play the same. They get in the passing lanes, they deny things, and they take you out of your game. I think that the great thing about our defense was it didn't matter, or the Bob Knight defensive mentality was, with help side, man side, ball side, everything. It didn't matter who was in. If you were in your position and play your position right, you were going to be able to fill it and cover everybody and cover everything. I don't think any one player is going to hurt Texas Tech's defense. This is my opinion, knowing how we play defense under the Knight regime. And this team, when I watched them play, they play the same style of defense, but these guys are so much more athletic than we were when I played in that defensive structure. So they're going to be fine. I don't think it's going to be a problem at all. Anyways, they've got other players on the bench that are going to come and fill in if he can't go. So I tell you what, we know that old cliche, defense wins championships. I would rather be sitting in Texas Tech's shoes right now than Virginia's, because Virginia's going to have to score to play, but they can do it. I mean, it's a very congruent offensive basketball team. They worked well together, but Texas Tech's defense, I don't think it's going to matter who's in. They're stifling.
Well, I think it matters if this happens. I think Odiasi, who's a guy who only played 24 minutes, doesn't really shoot the ball, scored 2 points, but he had 9 rebounds. I think if Owens can't go, Jim, you'll probably see him play more. My only concern is the referees have swallowed their whistles pretty much this entire tournament in all games. My only concern would be the way Texas Tech plays defense. If all of a sudden, and we talked about this before Saturday's game, what happens if somebody gets in foul trouble? Because I don't think they can go much deeper on the front line.
And you want to talk about a team getting hit like that in the NCAA tournament, all you got to do is think about Indiana and Duke years ago and Teddy V.
Yeah.
Exactly what happened to them. They were heading towards a potential national championship, another banner, and it's exactly what happened. They got in the foul trouble. I'm not going to say it was a bunch of bad calls, but
there was a bunch of bad calls in that game, Jim. You can say it.
They were horrible, and but that can happen, and that's a shame to see. So let's hope that doesn't happen. I don't know that it will, because both teams are defensive oriented, and so you're going to have a lot of similar play both ways. So the officials are hopefully going to get into a rhythm. I think they're afraid. They don't want to affect the game, but yet you can. And I don't have a problem with that call the other day, the foul that was called. It was a foul. I mean,
yeah.
There's a lot of people, you don't call fouls, and I'm like, So if that's the thought, then if I'm on defense, I'm fouling every time if they're not going to call it, of course. But I think we're going to see it evenly officiated. At least they're going to call the same both ways, I would certainly hope. But one other thing is, you guys may have talked about this before, but have you all noticed that this is going to be Archie's defense against Bob Knight's defense?
Yeah.
The Bob Knight style against the pack line.
Steve?
Very interested to see how that.
I think what that means is this, because I think Archie Miller's a good defensive coach, but I think Beard is a great defensive coach. And when you look at that, with the pack line defense, they're trying to keep you basically out of the free throw line. They're trying to push everything out. And Auburn, if they'd have shot a little bit better from three, they'd have won the game because of that. And I think the difference in this game is going to be Mooney and Culver and Moretti and their ability to shoot the ball from three-point range. I mean, Mooney was 4 for 8 the last game. Culver was only 1 for 3. Moretta was only 1 for 4. But if this team shoots even 38% from three-point line, Jim, I think they win the game.
Absolutely, and you got to remember that Virginia has the greatest player to come out of Lawrence Central High School too. He's out there shooting balls as well.
No, Risley's right here with us right now.
Steve, to give you some defense, though, doesn't Kyle Guy at least have to earn a national championship to replace you? I mean, you've got a banner. You got a ring, man. He doesn't have a ring yet.
Well, this is the thing. I think we lost Steve, so I'm calling him back right now. So he didn't hear me say something nice about him, so you got to let him know that I did.
And I did too. So, I mean, I even defended him. Daggone, I wasted. I'm not going to do it again. But
well,
it's just...
All right. So, Steve, I just actually paid you a compliment and didn't even realize you weren't on the line.
How did it? Was it my fault or what?
I don't know, but Jim made the comment that, and Virginia has the greatest player in Lawrence Central history, Kyle Guy, and I said, no. I said, we've got the greatest player in Lawrence Central history on the line with us right now. And then I'm waiting for you to say something, and you didn't say anything.
And Steve, doesn't Kyle Guy at least have to hang a banner to replace you? I mean, you got a ring, man. He didn't have a ring yet.
He's got a Mr. Basketball jersey, and he's the second leading scorer in the history of Lawrence Central basketball. It took him 4 years to do what I did in 3 years.
He's number one.
He claims to be number one in the modern era. No, I think that Kyle Guy is 1981 is no longer the modern era, I guess, is what I'm being told by Lawrence Central High School. When I brought that to their attention, but that's not important. It's not relevant. It doesn't matter.
The thing that is relevant. The thing that is relevant about Kyle Guy is this, Steve. When I don't know if you had the same feeling I did or if Jim did, but once he got fouled on that three, there was no doubt in my mind that they had won that game because he wasn't going to miss those free throws.
Yeah, and that's and that was a very tough call. I mean, it was a legitimate call. Mike, I know you and I talked about it.
I don't think it was tough. I think he fouled him on the shot even.
Yeah, it's just not. It's not the wrong call. They made the right call. It's just a tough call at that point in time. I hate to see something like that decide a game, but but he had to make free throws, and he stepped up. And I don't know that he ever touched a rim. I think all three of them just switched through the net. So there was no rattle in that kid at all. So, I probably would have missed at least one of them, knowing me.
You missed two of them. I've looked at your free throw percentage while you were at IU.
There you go.
Hey, it cost the Notre Dame women a national championship last night, missing a free throw.
Oh, did they play a game last night?
Yeah, they lost the national championship to who did they lose to, Jim?
They lost to Baylor.
Baylor, Baylor. The Baylor Bears beat them. Yeah,
with their best player at the free throw line, a missed free throw.
Well, that's why. Remember this. In the end, Auburn doesn't have a bitch because if the Harper kid, who's an 81% free throw shooter, makes that second free throw, they're up by 3. They can foul Kyle Guy when he catches the ball, and then they need to get lucky like they did against Purdue where you clang it off the rim and then get the ball and score.
That's the great thing about this tournament and where we are now. If you would go back and look at just Virginia and Texas Tech, go back and look at every game they've played, especially Auburn. Texas Tech. Look how easily somebody else could be playing in their place today.
I don't think that's true with Texas Tech because Texas Tech, the only really close game they had was Gonzaga.
Well, I'm just saying there's so many things that it can go either way. And it's mind-boggling how these things can change on a dime. But it's been one of the greatest tournaments in my memory as far as the quality of the games. And I think that's incredible.
Yeah, and when you look at it, Auburn could have been gone in the first round if the kid from New Mexico State hits the open look on the baseline.
And I think that's what I was actually thinking about. But
yeah,
it's
I
amazing
think it was
how,
too.
and these games, and the Purdue-Virginia game, the Purdue games are they're amazing. And you hate to see, not that I'm bumping up Purdue, but Carson Edwards, good Lord, the dude was just nuts, man.
Well, and then Klein the night before that.
It was crazy. But that's what you want. You want great players doing great things at great times, and that's what makes teams successful. Steve knows that because those are the kind of teams that he played on. He played and was a member of a team that had those kind of guys that did that, and that's why they hung a banner. Because that's what you have to have. You got to have the players that make the plays when the plays are needed.
Yeah, and when we look at this, I mean, the thing that concerns me is Texas Tech. I think their defense, Jim, is great at scrambling and getting in your face when you're shooting a three. It'll look like a guy's open. Next thing you know, he's got a hand in his face when he's shooting it. I think tonight's going to depend on Kyle Guy and Jerome and how well they can shoot the ball in this situation.
Absolutely, because we talked about how much stickier they are, and even show that even more. They're at number 11 in the country in forcing turnovers. That means they are on you nonstop. Virginia, on the other hand, number 235. Yeah. They're more relaxed. They let you make the mistake. They're on you, and they're playing solid defense, don't get me wrong, but they're wanting you to force you into a mistake where Texas Tech is just being aggressive, and they're just really at you in your face the whole time. And it's kind of, reminds you a little bit of Arkansas without the full court press, but it's 20
back in the mid-'90s. Hey, that's one thing, though. That's one thing that people haven't brought up that I wonder, do you see Texas Tech throw a little full court press? Because Virginia has had difficulties with that over the last 2 years.
It would certainly be a wrinkle that they have not shown, but a great time to pull it out if you can do it. It's also, and that's a great question for Steve. When you change something at this juncture like that, even though it's a subtle change, but it's still a change, how does that affect you in other ways, Steve? That's a great question for you because you've been there.
Well, and Jim, you cover IU as much as anybody, and you know that at IU we only did two things. We had motion offense and man-to-man defense. So we always forced other teams to change things. We never had to change what we were doing. Everybody knew how to guard us, how they could try and guard us, but you couldn't stop motion offense where you had players like Isaiah Thomas, or shooters like Ted Kitchell, or Mike Woodson, or Ray Tolbert and Landon Turner, who could run the floor as well as they could for big men. And when you force people to change their game, it takes them out of their sorts a little bit. So that's why I'm favoring Texas Tech in this game slightly. Is just I think that their defensive structure is going to be so strong. And I think Virginia's going to get themselves out of a little bit of sorts. I like the fact that Texas Tech presses. They'll throw a press on you, and teams react differently. They wear you down. And the one thing I noticed about Virginia was at halftime of the semifinal game, they were before they got off the court at halftime, they were all putting their hands on their knees, kind of humping down like, man, they were wore out. So I think Virginia Tech, Texas Tech's just going to run them into the ground, and I don't know if they're ready for that or not.
I think Virginia has the pressure on them. They're coming out of the ACC, one of the top conferences in the country. They're one of, however many teams the ACC got in this year. They were a number one seed. And Texas Tech, although they're a high seed and did a great season, still I don't see them as having the pressure on them that Virginia does. Virginia lost to a 16 seed last year. They've remarkably come back and are fighting for a national championship this year. But I see the pressure on Virginia and Tony Bennett more than I do on Chris Beard and Texas Tech.
Steve?
I agree. I agree entirely.
I don't, because you're both in a national championship game. You may never get this chance again, and I think Texas Tech expected to be here from the beginning anyways. And you watch this team play, there wasn't a big celebration in the locker room. Of course, they burnt Lubbock down, I think, but there was no big celebration in the locker room. I think this team expected to be here. And I think you talked about your team in 81, Steve, and how they were just focused on the next game. So I think it's according how you prepare for the game. If you're preparing for the game like as any other game, you're playing hard. I think Virginia got rid of the pressure when they got down 14 in the first round this year and then came back and won, because there's nothing Virginia players can do to erase the memory of last year, Jim. 20 years from now, when a 16 plays a 1, the first thing you're going to bring up is Virginia and how Virginia lost to that team.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great game. I'm looking forward to it. This may be the best, it may be the best national championship game we've seen in a while. I just have that feeling because not every game, but most of these games have just been good games. And again, college basketball, the parity is, we've talked about that for a couple of years, but it really, to me, showed itself this year because you see so much chalk in the tournament in the latter stages. But that's not just because those teams were actually good and the other teams were just as good. What a great year we've had.
Well, and I think another thing that needs to be brought up, Steve, is the fact that Virginia has not had to beat a 1 or a 2 seed to get to this point. Texas Tech, they beat a 1 seed Gonzaga. They beat 2 number 2 seeds. Does that play into effect anywhere here with the competition you've played to get here?
I don't think it does, because I'm not a big fan of the seeding process, truthfully. To say who's a 1 or anybody from a 1 to a 5 or 6 is a good team. You get below that, then you get into the mid majors, the smaller conference champions that are, kind of Cinderella stories and things as we know it. But I don't think it matters. I agree with Jim that this has been a great year because there's really, there were some 5s getting beat by 12s in the first round, but I think anything from a 5 to a 12 is pretty much all in one lump sum. And I tell you, I would not want to go against Texas Tech's defense. I would not be looking forward to facing that defensive team right now.
All right, so
pack a lunch.
Game.
I think that's what makes this tournament so good nowadays, even better than what it was in the past, because, as you said, there's not that much difference, Jim, between a 5 and a 12 seed anymore.
No, and that's why you see those yearly upsets. It's not – I don't know why they call it an upset anymore, because it's been so many years where you're sitting there going, all right, or 12-5, all right, which 12 is going to win this game? Because it's going to happen.
Well, now it's which 2 or 3 are going to win.
Yeah, it's crazy. It just keeps expanding outwards and outwards and outwards, and that's what it should do. That's the goal of this tournament. They've done a great job in that regard. They finally got here to where it's equalized out, because if you look back 10, 15 years ago, and I mean, there was just tons of blowouts in the first weekend. And who wants to watch that?
Yeah. Anymore, if you look at Texas Tech, their first-round game against Northern Kentucky was 72-57, and it was within a 10-point game for 30 minutes of that game.
And they're going to play for the national championship.
Yeah, and Virginia was down 14 points to a number 16 seed about 12, 15 minutes into their game, first round. So outside of Abilene,
weren't they down at the half?
What was
that?
Were
they down at the half?
Against Virginia, or against that team? I think they were down, but it was only like 2, and they went on like a 13-0 run to get back in the game. So you kind of knew what was going to happen, because I remember me and Steve texting each other back and forth, and as soon as they went on that run, it was like it was over. Because that's the other thing about these two teams. I mean, they are teams that can overcome things. I mean, Jarrett Culver, until the last 5 minutes, was a non-entity in the game against Michigan State the other night. But Jarrett Culver, to me, is kind of like Kyle Guy. If he gets a chance to beat you at the end of the game, he's going to beat you. And the Mooney kid, which I know through Bobby Sheridan, we found out the rest of the team calls him the professor. I still think the Mooney kid's the difference tonight. I think he's going to score over 20 points. I think he's going to hit some threes. They're going to free up some stuff. And it goes to this to me. When we talked about the Auburn game against Virginia in the Final Four, we talked about the ways to beat Virginia were to be able to shoot the ball over their defense and to be able to play well in transition. And I think that Texas Tech is even better at both of those things possibly than Auburn is.
And you go back defensively, we talked about, I talked a minute ago, I mentioned that Texas Tech is number 11 in forcing turnovers in the country, and Virginia, that's not something they do well. But in a game that is where every possession is critical, like this is probably going to be with these two defensive teams, if Texas Tech can steal a possession here and there from Virginia, that right there may be the difference in the game. That defense of theirs alone, if they can force those turnovers against Virginia and cause them to lose some quality possessions, it may be all it takes to win a national championship for Texas Tech.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I think the other thing that's impressive to me about Texas Tech, not to make this the Texas Tech Red Raider Weekly show, but they don't turn the ball over that much either.
That'll win you ball games. You look at Indiana season this year. The games where they had all those high turnovers, they got killed. But then you look when they had that good run where they were taking care of the ball. It's amazing. When you hold on to the ball, you're able to score more points. It's amazing how that works, right,
but
Steve?
The difference between Indiana and Texas Tech and Virginia is this. Texas Tech and Virginia both play at a high level of intensity where Indiana didn't, Steve.
Yeah, and that's the $10 question right there. We never played at this high level of intensity in the 80s when we played for night and under this system. So that's the key. They're able to do it, and Beer's got him in a situation where he's able to do this and do it at a high level of intensity, and they're under control. But they're totally under control. So I had not seen a lot of Texas Tech play this year. But I would not want to be facing this basketball team tonight. It's
All right. So
going to be tough.
Right now, you got to give us a score, Steve. What's your score and who you picking?
I think it's a toss-up. I mean, it's a pick-em game to me. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, but I'm going to take defense over offense any day I have to. I'd rather. It's easier to play defense than it is to manufacture an offense. So I'm liking Texas Tech, but these guys on Virginia, they're winners. They're champions. They know how to play. Kyle Guy is a real deal. They've got good players, solid. They're strong inside. If I have to pick a team, I'm going to go with Texas Tech in a 58 to 57 game or something like that, 56. It's going to be a close game, I think. It's not going to be a blowout.
All right, Jim.
I'm not too far off of pretty much everything Steve said. I'm also I'm going to go with Texas Tech. I got to pick one, but you could flip a coin. Obviously, both teams are playing for a national championship, so to get here, you got to be good, and they are. And it's just going to be. I think it's going to be a heck of a game. I really do. I think it's going to be like a 64-59 game. I think it's going to be close too. There may be a couple free throws at the end, but I think it's going to be very tight.
Yeah, and I think this. I think number one, Steve, when me, you, and Brian Ralph did our preview show before the NCAA tournament, I think there was one of us that picked Texas Tech to play Virginia in a national championship game.
I think that was you, Mike. I think that was you.
I was wondering where that was going. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, well, obviously Jim doesn't listen to our show, but all right, we had him on anyway.
Mike
I was mocking.
Mike
I was kidding.
Mike says I picked Villanova.
No, there is no Mike says that you picked Villanova. All right, Steve, you've done this to yourself. I'm going to find the show, and before we're done here, I'm going to give you picking Villanova to win the national championship over Duke.
Oh, don't embarrass me any more than I embarrass myself. Keep going.
But I think
I do a good job myself.
I think in the end, I think this. I don't think Virginia is a good offensive team. I think that's what bit them in the ass last year. I think with the Hunter kid, it made them a lot better. I think the Hunter kid's the difference in them losing early and making it this far. But in the end, I think Texas Tech's defense is just going to be too much for them, and I think Texas Tech beats them 63-55. All right, real quick before we wrap it up, because we're only like a half hour in anyways, but I know Jim had an interesting experience this past weekend, Saturday, at an IU baseball game. And it blew up all over the internet, and that was, I think we could make a movie about this and just call it Jim Meets Bob Knight. You want to tell us a little bit how this happened, Jim?
It was pretty surreal. We're just at Indiana had a doubleheader with Penn State on Saturday afternoon, and I actually had already been over there. I was at the football stadium because spring practice was going on. So we were there in the morning and just meandered over to the baseball, to cover that, and sitting in the press box, and you hear the next door to us the kids from the IU that's doing the BTN broadcast, but we hear them talking about Bob Knight, and we're like half paying attention, but then we hear them say, "Look at the monitor," and we're like, now they're getting our attention, and we're like, what are you talking about? And then we're beating on the window, saying, "Are you saying Bob Knight is here?" And one of them nodded his head, and I was knocking people down trying to get out of that press box and getting the camera going, and here comes Coach Knight in a golf cart, and I'm like, I thought it was maybe an impersonator at first, to be honest with you. But I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really happening, because you're aware of what's going on and the enormity of it, but you're trying to keep your head, and which is difficult for me on a normal circumstance, but especially in a circumstance like that. But he pulls up and he stops, and I was there and asking the question how he felt, and he was funny, and he's quip. My wife's not here to tell me, so I'm not sure. He's just being kind of funny, and that was great. And I asked him what it was like to be back in Indiana, and he said it's great to be here. But the enormity of this is, at least for those inside of Hoosier Nation, it can't be understated. I mean, to 180,000 views on that 51-second video right now. That's mind-boggling to me. ESPN is talking about Bob Knight being here. This is a major news story because, to me, it's the biggest rift in American sports today, and I hope it comes to an end. And I think, from what I saw, I don't have anything other than to back that up, but I think that this may be a first step. He reached out to Indiana to come there to that game, and he was very affable, and this is a very public thing. So I don't know if it was Coach Knight sticking his toe in the water or just Coach Knight doing what he wants to do, when he wants to do it, and how he wants to do it. But it was certainly a surreal moment, but great to see because both of them need this. Indiana needs it. Bob Knight needs this. He deserves it for what he's done. But he needs it, too, because he's left too much of a legacy. He's one of the greatest in the history of this game. He's on the Mount Rushmore of college basketball coaches. And to have this ripped, for him to take that to his grave would be a horrific thing. And for both parties, I really believe that. I think it's equally for both sides. And he's been the bigger part, and he stepped, or not the bigger part, but he stepped up and reached out. And I don't know if it's the people that are close to him that have gotten to him and said, hey, man, don't let this pass by. Or, maybe he doesn't remember how mad he really was in Indiana. Maybe he's let it go. I don't know. But I think it's a great thing for Indiana, and I think it's a great thing for Bob Knight. But it's a great thing for the fans of Indiana as well. And it was an amazing experience. I got to be honest with you, to be a part of that. Because there will never be another first return to Indiana by Bob Knight. That's just an amazing thing.
Yeah, so hopefully what happens after this, Steve, is maybe Knight shows up at an IU game next year.
Yeah, I mean, you never know with Knight. The only thing I'll tell you about Bob Knight is, having known him for over 40 years, there's a method to his madness. He has a methodology that he knows, and he controls everything, and how he wants to do things, how he wants to make things work for him. So whether he comes to a basketball game or not, I don't know. I would think the problem with him coming to a basketball game is they probably wouldn't get the rest of the game played if he walked into Assembly Hall and sat down. I'm not sure that people would quiet down enough they could even call the game or play the game, the rest of the game. And that's why we all, as players, said when we had the 81 reunion, the 76, said, God, you almost don't want him here because you'll never get the second half of the game played if he walks into the building. But this was a surprise to me because Jim called me immediately and said, hey, I just talked to Coach Knight. He's at a baseball game, and we put your post up on our website, Jim, and my phone has not stopped blowing up since. I cannot believe it. It's about the fans. Everybody's thrilled to death that he came back, and it kind of just lifted the whole spirits of Hoosier Nation that he came back. I think I'm not sure if even Fred Glass didn't maybe orchestrate this in some fashion or throw an olive branch out there because of the struggles that Indiana's had in basketball-wise in a while, that he didn't orchestrate this or get this done in some fashion. I don't
think Fred Glass had anything to do with this.
No, you're probably right, Mike. You're probably right. But I'm just trying to find the common denominator here. Bob Hamill was with him. When he
I
walked
think
into
that
the
may have
building.
been a part of it right
Yeah.
there. I think Bob may have been
Bob
a big part of it.
Yeah, Bob Hamill's a genuinely great guy. But I think they finally just said, it's time to end this, bury this thing. I hope. I don't know. It's a wonderful thing.
It is, and they handled it. To me, it was a perfect way. They just let it be what it was. There was no pomp and circumstance. They arrived. They had 2 golf carts ready for them. They had the security ready for them to take them to the press box. There was no fanfare. There was no. And the funny thing is, if you go back and watch the BTN video, you'll see the golf cart going by. There'll be people that's oblivious to who's in that golf cart that are within feet. And I'm like, oh, my God, some of these people have no idea. They just walked by Bob Knight at Indiana for the first time in 19 years. And they have no idea. It was blowing my mind. And because there was a full stadium at that baseball game. It was packed. But just amazing. But, yeah, it was surreal.
Oh, yeah, and you had the other thing that stood out to me was the Daily Hoosier, Mike Schumann, the article he wrote about the Indiana baseball coach?
Yeah.
That was a
Mike
great
did
article.
A great job, and it was a great, Jeff Mercer, I've been meaning to tell the the baseball SID this. After each game when we meet, he's a long talker, man. He gives the longest answers. But if you, as a reporter, if you listen to his answers, you will learn about the game of baseball. You will learn what they're doing, what they're trying to do, because that's what he's telling you. He's giving you great stuff. And he is an emotional guy. You can tell he's a fan of sports. You can tell, and it was just great. I mean, for him to say he was nearly brought to tears, I mean, that's another coach. That's mind-boggling, the effect that this has on people.
Yeah, and I know this. I was an Indiana fan basically from when I was born in the late 60s. And I'll tell you, the Final Four was getting ready to start, but all I could think about was Bobby Knight back in Indiana, because I don't think people understand, even Hoosier fans that are under the age of 30, I don't think they understand what Bob Knight meant to this entire state at one point, Steve.
No, you say a lot of people. He was driving by in a golf cart. Most of those kids weren't born when Bob Knight left Indiana. A lot of them weren't, so they're not going to know who he is. But they just don't understand how much passion there is for Indiana basketball, how great of a program it had been, and how it's kind of fallen in decline. Hopefully, it's working its way back. We're going to get back there, we hope. But yeah, like Jim said, he's on the Mount Rushmore of coaches. You got to put him up there if you're gonna make a Mount Rushmore of basketball coaches in college basketball. Nice Face is going to have to be up there. But the baseball team, don't they have Scott Rowland on their staff too as well, guys?
He is, and he plays for the Cardinals, of course, and
he played for the Reds. What are you, are you a Cardinals fan, Jim?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay. He was he played for the Cincinnati Reds. That's the only thing that you need to know about Scott Rowland.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I guess that ancient history over in St. Louis.
He was an all-star at Cincinnati, and I think that was after. Was that after St. Louis? Didn't he retire?
Oh, he was great.
Yeah,
I think he did. I think he retired there.
I think he was mainly a Philly, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'm looking at him, picture of him right now, and he's in a Phillies hat right now.
Yeah, I think the majority of his career was as a Philly, and I think Scott Rowland is one of the greatest defensive third basemen that ever lived, and I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I think he won like 7 or 8.
I love watching him play.
Yeah, I mean, hell, he had over 300 home runs career, but defensively, outside of Brooks Robinson, he was as good as anybody I ever saw.
Yeah, he was like Chris Sabo on crack.
No, he was like Chris Sabo if Chris Sabo would have played good for more than 5 years.
I know who Chris Sabo is, too, yeah.
Do you know who Chris Sabo? You do know who Chris Sabo is, Steve?
Yeah, he played third base for the Reds, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Steve is baseball challenged, so he
that's a tough one to pull out.
Not really. Not for me, but I also live
I
live 20 minutes from Cincinnati, so it's easier for me.
The Cincinnati Reds have always been my favorite baseball team.
Oh my God!
With the Yankees.
Except for along with the Yankees and the Dodgers, and now he likes the Angels because he fell.
I'm not a Dodgers fan. I just live out here, so I root for the team. It's close out here just because it's our city's team. But I definitely have always been a Reds fan.
So, Steve, if you lived in Lexington, would you cheer for the Kentucky Wildcats?
No.
Okay.
That's a different sport.
He's sitting out at Chavez Ravine with his Mai Tai and his pinky out and his feet up on his chair in front of him at the...
Nah. Not me. I've got my Diet Coke and my Dodger dog, baby. My $10 Dodger dog.
Ooh, $10
No,
Dodger
but
dogs.
Knight, though, Tony La Russa was one of Knight's best friends.
Well, Johnny Bench,
and
Ted Williams.
Johnny Bench, yeah.
I remember him watching.
Guys,
You remember the old show with Kirk Gowdy? It was called like The Outdoorsman or something. Because
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
late 70s, early 80s, where Bob Knight was actually fly fishing with Kirk Gowdy on that show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what was that show called? Yeah.
I think it was called The
Great
Outdoorsman, but I'm not sure.
Outdoorsman, yeah.
But the thing that's impressive about that is this, because Bob Knight was on it, I sat there and watched the entire hour when I was 12 years old.
Yeah, but La Russa came to many of our practices and talked to us about motivation and things like that, and about preparation and getting ready to go. And Knight always had those guys come in, but Knight was always a big baseball fan. I don't know, Mike, did he play baseball?
I have no
college?
idea. He might have played in high
know.
school, but I mean, the thing that I remember about Knight was I remember he was a Reds fan during the Big Red Machine era, because I know him and Johnny Bench were actually really close. Yeah. And then I remember him going to Cardinals games when La Russa was there. So, yeah, I think that Bob Knight was definitely a baseball fan, is a baseball fan, obviously, because he went to the IU baseball game the other day. So hopefully that will continue, because it's the way it should be, because I don't care what you say about Bob Knight and the grab at Neil Reed. There's a lot of stuff Bob Knight did that people didn't see. And like Steve, I've never talked to too many former IU players that played for 4 years for Bob Knight that don't think an awful lot of him.
No, we could do an entire show on this. We could get Jim back on, and I could tell you 45 to 50 minutes of stories of Bob Knight that nobody ever knows, of the great things that he did and the way he reached out to people and the quiet things that he did, behind the scenes. No, I'm never going to talk bad about Bob Knight. What happened with Neil Reed was an unfortunate incident late in his career. It defined his career for the most part, to some degree.
Well, it defined his career for people that are always looking for the worst in people.
Worse than it, exactly. Great point. But I can tell you things. When you got patted on the ass by Bob Knight, it meant something. It means that you had done good and you had earned that pat. It wasn't just given to you because you made a great play. You had, in his eyes, you had said, you gave me the effort that I expect everybody to give all the time, and that's what wins championships. And he's all about that. And I will go to my grave defending Bob Knight, despite what some other former IU basketball players on radio shows want to do.
Oh, Dan Jokic? Fuck him. I'm so sick of Dan Dockich. You know what? This is the thing.
I'm not naming any names.
I mean, it's Dan Dockich, and, he's just a crybaby who didn't get his way. He didn't get the IU job. If I remember right, when they let Sampson go partway through the year, he got the job. He screwed it up. He had players that wanted to leave if he was going to be there. Dan Dockich is just a miserable human being. He's not very good at calling basketball games. And basically all he does is he's like the white Stephen A. Smith. He gets on there and he says the dumbest stuff imaginable just to get a rise out of people so people will tweet to him and get in an argument with him. Dan Dockich was 6'5". He had basically very little basketball talent. And when you watch this, Knight made him what he is today by claiming that he held Michael Jordan to 16 points. The thing that held Michael Jordan to 16 points was he was sick that game, and he got in foul trouble like 8 minutes into the game. Outside of that, Dan Dockich has done nothing. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but he posted a video of him shooting like a 15-footer at one of these games. And, I mean, he shoots a little bit, like a girl. I mean, and I'm talking about a girl from the 1960s with like the one-handed push shot, like Risley used to shoot. But yeah, Dan Dockich is just Dan Dockich is just mad because he's not the head coach at IU.
I'm going to get a text from Dockich any minute now.
So you can tell Dan Dockich if he wants, he can come on the show and we can discuss this, me and him. in a cordial,
Mike's pulling out the
civilized
knives
manner.
today, man. It's a knife fight on here today, baby.
Oh, Dan Dockich would be like, he's going to come in here with a knife, but it's not going to be a knife fight, and he's going to be screwed because Dan Dockich is just a soft little white dude. I mean, nobody cares about Dan Dockich anyways. And this is the thing. When you listen to him do the games, my key for you is this, all right? And I know that maybe I don't have millions of listeners and I'm not on ESPN, but that's also because I won't kiss people's asses. But the other thing I know is when you're Dan Dockich and you do NCAA basketball games and you're doing the NIT at IU, you failed.
But they wanted IU name on there, man. Dan. I think Dan's funny. I think he's funny. I think he does exactly what he wants to do. I think he reminds me. He's the sports equivalent of Howard Stern.
Exactly. And this is the thing, though. Jim. If you have to do that to be entertaining, are you really entertaining?
Well, I think the proof's in the numbers. So the greatest thing about that I remembered about that movie, and I think that Dan has the same thing. Half the people listen to him because they love him, and half the people listen to him because they hate him. But guess what? They're all listening to him. So,
but guess what?
I will say that
I don't listen to him at all.
Well, everybody.
This is the thing.
I get it.
He could think what he wants about Bob Knight, but when Bob Knight is shown in a state where maybe he's not in perfect health anymore, and then you have a guy who basically, if it wasn't for Bob Knight, he wouldn't be in the position he's at. Maybe just shut up and don't say anything.
Now that I agree with you. I'm to that point as well. No matter what my opinions are about anything, I'm like, you know what? You get to a point in life it's where, and I saw a great clip of Kevin Hart on Joe Rogan's podcast just this morning. He was talking about social media and how there are just people that be going along and they'll just be somebody that, you know what, I don't like that. That's terrible. Well, and they'll ask, well, why is it terrible? Oh, I ain't got time for it. It's just terrible. And social media, there's so much of that. There's people they throw out stuff and they don't want to back it with some information. But it is what it is. And I think that you can't. If we wanted to do that, we could easily sit there and slice either Bob Knight up or Dan Dockich up or me up or easily. But I think you get to a point where you're like, well, what's better? What's it better to do? Should we just keep beating on that stuff, but then if it works for you to talk about it and get your ratings, then maybe someone talks about their own coach in a certain bad way. I don't know. But it
shouldn't have been done. He just needs to shut up. If Bob Knight could defend himself and he wanted to say that stuff and have Bob Knight on his show and they could discuss it, I would listen to that all day. But I'm not going to listen to him rip on Bob Knight, and Bob Knight's the reason he's where he's at today.
And again, I don't have a problem with that. I get it. I sit back and look at things, and sometimes I shake my head, and sometimes I just let it. What stuff that he makes, some stuff that Dockett says, I like to laugh at, and some stuff I like, that's a little rough or whatever. But I kind of, in my mind, I know where he's going and why he's doing it. I think that there's, Steve talks about Coach Knight having a method. Yes, boom. And he's got a job to do. And you know
what?
He's got
a job to do.
Exactly. They are paying his ass to put ears on the radio, and
exactly. He's doing a good job of that.
I just find it sad when you have to rip up somebody who did so much for you.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's easy to do. That's easy to do. But Dale Earnhardt used to say this: "I don't care if you're booing me or cheering me, as long as you're making noise, I'm there." and that was Dale Earnhardt's thing. I don't care if you're booing me or cheering me, because there was a point in time when Dale Earnhardt was the most either hated driver in NASCAR or the most beloved, 50-50, kind of like Dockage. But he said, if you're making noise, that means I'm there, and I want you to know I'm there. And that's what Dan does really well. But he's selling commercials, and really, I know Dan personally to some degree. He's actually a pretty funny guy. He's a nice guy. Really, I don't understand the rift he has with IU. I don't get that. Why he feels he needs to beat up IU so much when he played there. As a former player, I don't appreciate that. But that's just Dan. Everybody's got their own shtick. It's whatever. But he's selling commercials for the most part. But the other thing, too, is how great is it that the noise that was made when Bob Knight comes back to campus and shows up at a baseball game, not even a basketball game, not at Cook Hall, not at Assembly Hall. He goes to the baseball field, and, the views that your video got, how monumental is that to how much of an icon that he is? It's mind-boggling, isn't it? Yeah, it's mind-boggling. How much of an icon? It blew up. It blew up everywhere. Yeah.
I already knew he's an icon, and even I did not expect that. It does. It shows. I mean, you said it earlier, and I was thinking the same thing. If he were to come back to a game next year, I don't know how they do it because there's going to be
couldn't do it.
There's going to be 17,422 media requests, much less people in the stands. Every player that has ever played for him that can be there would be there. And I'm talking.
I would fly back.
I don't know how many.
I would fly back.
No, you wouldn't, because you'll bitch because they're going to sit you behind a band again.
That's okay. I'll sit behind the band for that one. Because I guess most of us players will be walking on the court with him as former players. I'm sure knowing Coach Knight and the loyalty he has to his players, we'd all be walking right out with him and going to center court and taking a bow and hugging him. And, yeah, if it would ever happen. But I was amazed when you called me, Jim, and I went right to your video, and I called Mike immediately, and we posted it on our side immediately. It blew up on our side as well as everybody's. Just the fanfare that came from him just showing up on campus in any capacity at all. So that's why I'm always going to be a fan of his. Like I said, I met him in probably 1975, 76 when he started recruiting me. And, he's one of those guys, where I said, I've got his cell phone number. If I need to call him, I could. I don't ever, because I'm going to get yelled at if I do. So I don't want that to happen. But he's just that loyal, and that religion, that Hoosier Nation started with him. So it was amazing how big of an event that was.
If Elvis would have showed up, he'd have gotten no attention with Bob Knight there, and Elvis has been dead for 40 years.
Yeah.
I think a dead Elvis showing up probably would have got a lot of attention. No, Jim.
Now, in Bloomington, maybe not. not with Bob Knight there.
Hey, put it like this. You had 180,000 hits. They were probably all from Indiana. If you'd have had Elvis, though, you'd have had the rest of the world. In Indiana, Bobby Knight's still a bigger deal, though.
Hey, and Marcus Square Arena was Elvis's last concert, too, I believe, if I'm not mistaken on that.
You are correct, sir.
Yeah. Last concert he played before he passed away was at Marcus Square Arena in Indianapolis.
Were you there,
Absolutely.
Steve?
So we had our own Elvis sighting Saturday, because that was seeing Bob Knight at Indiana was about as unlikely as seeing Elvis show up at Indiana.
I was shocked when you called me and told me that. I was absolutely shocked that he did it. But that's Bob Knight. He does things his own way. Like I said, there's a method to his madness, and he knows what he wants to do. I think he wants to make amends with the university and put it all at rest, put it at peace, and go on and finish out. I think it's a great first step, and I think you'll see him in Assembly Hall. I think he'll show up to a game next year. He likes Archie Miller, Mike, right?
Yep.
We both
thought
said,
Archie Miller was a good hire.
Yeah, he thought Archie Miller was a good hire. I'm not going to be surprised at all if he doesn't walk into Assembly Hall next year and support Archie Miller in the basketball program. And, Mike, the question to you is, if he comes back, does that program elevate almost immediately again?
No. They got to win, and you got to win in March. I mean, it would elevate the exposure. And I don't
give
know.
It a hell of a bump.
Yeah. The exposure it will, but still, to elevate the entire program, they've got to be playing in the NCAA tournament.
No, Mike's right. I mean, you got to win. You got to get the players.
Right.
And there's a process. But to what you're saying, I've said it earlier. I think it would give it an unbelievable bump because he still has more sway over this than say Archie or anybody else. He's got sway. I mean, he can really still cause that kind of bump in this program, I think.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt he can, but we need to play in March. And we need to play in the Final Four in 2 years, and then me, you, and Steve can all meet up at the Final Four because it'll be in Indianapolis.
Oh, my gosh,
I'm
that's
coming
perfect
back
timing.
to that. I'm coming back for that for sure. I will be back for the Final Four in
Don't you
Indianapolis.
threaten me, Risley. Don't threaten me on air. Everybody just heard it. All right, guys. Jim, you want to tell everybody where they can find the Indiana Sports Beat every day?
Absolutely. You can find us on IndianaSportsBeat.com, of course. You can also go to thegruelingtruth.net, of course, as well as thedailyhoosier.com. We're also, if you're in southern Indiana, you can catch us on ESPN 97.7 in Evansville. I think we're about to add a station in Louisville, but I'll wait to hold on to that one. Some other stations we're looking to add to as well. But you can follow me on Twitter.
You just didn't hold on to it. You just didn't hold on to it. You just announced
hold on to it.
No, he didn't. He just said a station in Louisville. He didn't say which one. Go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry for the rude interruption. Jeez.
That's all right. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Coyle ISB. But GruelingTruth.net, man, that's the place.
All right, guys.
Great to be here, man.
We appreciate Jim, and we will have you on more as we go. I mean, it's really wasn't sure about you before, but he's like that. He's still not sure about me either. It's just he has to be on with me because I'm the actual host of the show.
That is always an advantage.
Oh, he's
Mike,
getting better because usually he's the co-host. And
I'm just a role player.
Tomorrow,
I fill my role.
Tomorrow we're going to have a special start to the show because tomorrow we're going to have Brian Ralph on from Fansided, Busting Brackets, to talk about today's game. Jim, you can come back if you want to. But what we're going to do is, I think at the start of the show, we're going to go back to last year's show after the national championship game where Risley basically called me a loser and a moron because I picked Villanova to beat Michigan in the national championship game. And then because of it, and Steve being wrong, he had to sing One Shining Moment. So I think we may replay Steve singing One Shining Moment. Because I would like to bring up, Steve, this will be, if Texas Tech wins it all tonight, the second year in a row I picked a national champion before the tournament started.
Mike, have I ever said you're not a genius? Have I ever said you're not a genius? I've never not said that.
No, but I just like to hear it.
Hey, last year's pick wasn't anything. Picking this one, that's a good pick here.
Well, last year was something.
Before
yeah, I picked Texas Tech in November. You can ask Steve, and we got a show where I picked it.
Who won last year? Villanova?
Yeah.
North Carolina? Who won? I forget.
Villanova. They beat Michigan.
Villanova.
Yeah, that's not a reach. There's no reach there.
It was for Risley because he didn't think Villanova was that good.
Well, this is a good pick. Picking Texas Tech, that's a good pick. That's a smart pick, actually, because every other dumbass like me had Duke winning it in their bracket, and it was dumb. But,
I did have Duke in the Final Four losing to Texas Tech, and I had North Carolina losing to Virginia, so I was only half right on the Final Four, but I'm 1,000% tonight. So, all right, guys.
That's pretty good.
We're going to wrap the show up. Remember, you can follow Steve Risley at SRisley34. Jim, what was your Twitter handle again?
At Jim Coyle ISB.
All right. I knew that. I just wanted you to say it. That, and I usually forget a letter somewhere. We're going to wrap it up. Tomorrow, of course, we'll have Brian Ralph. Jim, if he wants to come back, you're always welcome. Thursday, we'll have Max Lipister, who is an NBA or NFL agent. And then on Friday, we'll have a little NBA playoff preview with Bobby Sheridan and hopefully Cole Hanna. We'll have to ask him at some point, Steve. Don't forget, one of us got to ask Cole to do that. At 2 o'clock today, Bobby Sheridan will be on the Sheridan Report with his pick, the gambling side of the Final Four. So make sure you check that out also. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up from here on out. I want to remind you, you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jim Coyle, Steve Risley, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.